You are going to burn with this house, you cursed old woman." Those were the last words I heard before I saw the match ignite. My son, Andrew, had eyes filled with a hatred I didn't recognize. He was holding a matchstick between his fingers, and in that instant, I knew it wasn't just a threat. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from." The smell of gasoline already hung in the air. I felt my heart pounding hard against my chest as the fire began to bite at the living room curtains. The same curtains I had sewn by hand when William and I first built this house 40 years ago. I heard the click of the front door locking shut. I heard Andrew's car driving away. For a moment I stood still, watching the shadows of the fire dance on the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took a deep breath and touched with a trembling hand the small bulge I had hidden beneath my dress. It was my secret, my salvation, my justice. The smoke began to climb the staircase slowly, like a monster searching for air. I knew I had little time, but I also knew I couldn't die. Not yet. Not without putting everything in its place. The first time I met fire, I was 7 years old. My father burned the fields to renew the soil, and he told me, "Don't fear the fire, Laura. Fire only destroys what is useless." I never forgot those words, and that night, as the heat brushed my skin, I knew fate was repeating the lesson for me. I moved slowly, covering my face with a damp handkerchief. The flames were already licking at the dining room furniture, and the ceiling was creaking with a sound that hurt more than the heat. I knew every corner of that house. I had built it with William, brick by brick. Every wall held memories, laughter, and wounds. And now it was all falling apart before my eyes, reduced to smoke. But it wasn't the fire that hurt the most. It was the betrayal, the look in my own son's eyes, cold, empty. I never thought ambition could rot someone's soul so deeply. 3 weeks earlier, I had overheard Andrew on the phone in the garden. "Once Mom's out of the picture, we'll sell the house and the land. She's getting senile anyway. No one will question it." My heart had stopped beating for a moment. The gardening shears fell from my hand. That's when I knew what my son was planning. Not just stealing my property, but erasing me completely. That's when I began to prepare. I walked with difficulty to the back room where I kept a metal box under the floorboards. Years ago, when William was still alive, he had told me in secret, "If things ever get bad, hide this, Laura. No one should see it until it's necessary." That box was my treasure and my burden. And that night, as the fire roared around me, I knew the time had come. I knelt, lifted the boards, and pulled out the box. It was hot to the touch, but intact. The smoke was already burning my lungs. My throat was stinging, but I couldn't stop. I took a scarf, wrapped the box, tucked it under my dress, and held it against my stomach. Then I opened the bedroom window and jumped. I fell onto the damp earth of the yard, rolled and covered my face. The fresh air rushed into my lungs like a second chance. The neighbors arrived minutes later, shouting, throwing buckets of water, calling the fire department. They found me barefoot, covered in ash, with my eyes open but tearless. "My God, Laura, what happened?" shouted Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor for the last 15 years. "An accident," I lied, my voice shaking. "I think it was the gas stove. No one suspected. No one imagined it had been my own son. And I didn't say a word because if life had taught me anything, it was that silence sometimes screams louder than the truth." The firefighters took almost an hour to put out the flames. When the smoke cleared, my house was a black ruin, a skeleton of what was once my home. And among the wreckage, I saw Andrew return. He came running, faking desperation, shouting my name. "Mom! Mom! For God's sake, where are you?" His words were theater. I watched him from a distance, covered by a blanket while the paramedics tended to me. He didn't see me at first, and when he stepped into the destroyed house, his face changed. There in the doorway of the room, he realized something that made him turn pale. The fire hadn't reached that area, and the space where the box had been was empty. His eyes widened, and for a moment I saw genuine fear on his face. The following hours were a blur. Hospital, bandages, questions, silence. No one understood how I had survived. I knew it wasn't luck. It was destiny. The next day, Andrew came to see me. His hands were bandaged, a fake injury, surely, and he had an expression that tried to pass as guilt. "Mom," he whispered, pulling a chair next to my hospital bed. "I don't know how this happened. The fire, the gas." I looked at him. His eyes couldn't hold mine. "Don't worry, son," I told him calmly. "Houses can be rebuilt." But a voice inside me whispered something different. Houses can be rebuilt. Yes. But souls? Those are repaid with fire. That night in the hospital bed, while the wind rattled the window, I touched the bulge under the sheet. The wrapped box was still with me. No one knew. And as I stroked it, I felt a smile slowly form on my lips, because I understood that the fire he had started hadn't destroyed me. It had only ignited mine. I woke up in the hospital 3 days after the fire. The room smelled of antiseptic and plastic, but also of fear. All around me, the white walls seemed to watch me like silent witnesses. The nurse, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled at me, surprised to see me awake. "It's a miracle, Mrs. Collins," she said sweetly. "With what happened, no one thought you would make it out alive." I smiled weakly. A miracle, yes, but not the one they thought. I knew the fire hadn't spared me. It had simply chosen me for something more. During the days I spent in the hospital, everyone came to see me. The neighbors, acquaintances, even the police. Only one person was missing, Andrew. My son didn't show up until the 4th day, and when he did, he came in with cheap flowers and a rehearsed expression. "Mom," he mumbled, "you look better." "Yes, son," I replied without looking at him. "Fire purifies, they say." His face turned pale. I saw him swallow hard. For a moment, I thought he was going to apologize, but he didn't. The silence between us was a wall. I knew, and he sensed that I knew. Meanwhile, everyone thought I had lost my memory. The nurse, the doctor, the police, they all asked me the same questions. "Do you remember how the fire started? Did you see anyone near the house? Did you leave anything on?" I always answered the same thing. "I don't remember. I just felt the heat." I let them think I was a confused, fragile, disoriented old woman. It was better that way because a woman who appears weak becomes invisible, and I needed to go unnoticed to act. On the 5th day, I was discharged. The nurse helped me get dressed and gather the few things I had, including the metal box I had kept hidden under my pillow. No one had questioned it. They assumed it contained medication or sentimental items saved from the fire. "Where will you go, Mrs. Collins?" the nurse asked, concerned. "My son has arranged everything," I lied. "Ta." The truth was that Andrew had barely mentioned my living arrangements. He had mumbled something about temporary accommodations while looking at his phone. I knew what that meant. The cheapest nursing home he could find while he liquidated my assets. But I had my own plans. When I left the hospital, instead of waiting for Andrew, I called a taxi. The driver, an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair, helped me with my small bag. "Where to, ma'am?" I gave him the address of the Lakeview Motel, a modest place on the outskirts of town. I had called ahead the day before, using the hospital phone when no one was watching. When we arrived, the motel manager, a woman named Debbie with bottle blonde hair and kind eyes, showed me to a small room with a view of the artificial lake. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's clean and quiet." "It's perfect," I assured her. And it was, because no one would think to look for me there. That evening, I sat on the bed and finally opened William's metal box. Inside were documents, photographs, letters, and something else. Something Andrew should never discover. First, there was a DNA test. The results were clear. Andrew wasn't William's biological son. My hands trembled as I read it again. I had always known, of course. William and I had married when I was already 2 months pregnant with another man's child. But William had loved Andrew as his own, never telling him the truth. The second document was even more shocking. A will. Not the one Andrew knew about, the one that left everything to him, but a newer one, signed just months before William's death. In the event of foul play or suspicious circumstances surrounding my wife Laura's death or well-being, all assets are to be transferred to Marcus Johnson, son of Elaine Johnson and myself, William Collins. My heart pounded. William had known. He had suspected Andrew might try something, and he had prepared for it. There was a photograph, too, a young man with William's eyes and smile. On the back was written, "Marcus, age 25, mechanic in Charleston." William had another son, a son he had never told me about from before we met, a son who now stood to inherit everything if anything happened to me under suspicious circumstances. As I sat there surrounded by these revelations, my phone rang. It was Andrew. "Mom, where the hell are you?" His voice was tight with anger barely concealed as concern. "I went to pick you up at the hospital and they said you'd left hours ago." "I needed some time alone, son," I said calmly, "to process everything. You can't just disappear like that. You're not well, you need supervision." I almost laughed. "Supervision or surveillance, Andrew?" There was a pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, dear. I'm just tired. I'll call you tomorrow." I hung up before he could protest. Then I turned off my phone. I needed to think, to plan. That night I slept better than I had in years, despite the lumpy motel mattress. For the first time since William's death, I wasn't alone in my fight against Andrew's greed. I had an ally, even if he didn't know it yet. The next morning I asked Debbie at the front desk if she knew of any rental properties in the area. "Actually," she said, "my sister has a small guest house she's looking to rent. Nothing fancy, but it's furnished and private." By afternoon, I had signed a month-to-month lease on a small cottage half a mile from town. I paid 3 months in advance from the emergency cash William and I had always kept hidden, money Andrew knew nothing about. I spent the next 2 days settling in and avoiding Andrew's increasingly frantic calls. Finally, I answered. "Where are you staying?" he demanded. "I've been worried sick. I've found a place," I said. "I need some independence, Andrew." "Independence? Mom, you're 68 years old and just survived a house fire. You need care." The concern in his voice sounded genuine. If I hadn't overheard his plans, if I hadn't seen the look in his eyes as he lit the match, I might have believed him. "Why don't you come over for dinner tonight?" I suggested. "I'll text you the address." He arrived at 6, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and a forced smile. His eyes darted around the cottage, assessing its value, its contents. "It's cozy," he said, which was his way of saying small and worthless. "It suits me," I replied. Over dinner, a simple roast chicken I'd prepared, he tried to convince me to move in with him and his wife, Vanessa. "We have that big guest suite downstairs," he argued. "You'd have your privacy, but we'd be right there if you needed anything. If I needed anything, or if they needed to monitor me, to make sure I didn't interfere with their plans." That's very generous, I said, cutting my chicken methodically, but I prefer my independence. His fork clattered against the plate. Mom, be reasonable. You can't live alone after what happened. What if there's another fire? What if you fall? I looked at him directly. What are the chances of 2 fires, Andrew? His face froze. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What are you implying? I smiled. Nothing, dear. Just that lightning rarely strikes twice. He left shortly after, frustrated but trying not to show it. At the door, he tried one more time. At least let me help you financially. That insurance money might take months to come through. I'll manage, I said. I always have. After he drove away, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The game had begun. Now I needed to find Marcus Johnson. The next morning, I went into town to the local library. The young librarian helped me use the computer to search for mechanic shops in Charleston. There were dozens, of course. It would take forever to call them all asking for Marcus Johnson. I needed a different approach. I spent hours searching online directories and social media until finally I found a small repair shop called Johnson's Automotive on the outskirts of Charleston. The website showed a picture of the owner, a man in his mid-30s with familiar eyes, William's eyes. I wrote down the address and phone number. Then, instead of calling, I decided to take a bus to Charleston the next day. Some things needed to be done in person. That evening, as I was walking back to my cottage, I noticed a truck parked across the street with someone sitting inside. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I quickened my pace. When I reached my door, I glanced back. The truck was driving away, but not before I caught a glimpse of the driver, a man I'd never seen before. I double-locked the door that night and placed a chair against it. The next morning, I took the early bus to Charleston. 3 hours later, I stood outside Johnson's Automotive, gathering my courage. The garage was small but well-maintained, with a neat office attached. As I approached, a man emerged from under the hood of a car. He was tall, with broad shoulders, dark hair peppered with gray at the temples, and eyes, William's eyes, that widened slightly when he saw me. "Can I help you, ma'am?" His voice was deep, polite. I took a breath. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Laura Collins," I said. "I believe you knew my husband, William Collins." The rag stopped moving. His eyes, so like William's, studied me carefully. "I think you'd better come inside," he said finally, gesturing toward the office. Inside, he offered me a seat and a cup of coffee, which I accepted with trembling hands. "How did you find me?" he asked, sitting across from me. "William left documents," I said simply. "Pictures of you." Marcus nodded slowly. "I haven't seen William in, it must be 10 years now." "He passed away 3 years ago," I said. "Heart attack." Pain flickered across his face. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good man." "You knew him well?" I asked carefully. Marcus looked down at his hands, mechanic's hands like William's had been. "He was my father," he said quietly, "but I guess you know that already." I nodded. "I only found out recently, after," I hesitated, "after my house burned down." His head snapped up. "Your house burned down? Are you okay?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly brought tears to my eyes. This stranger, this son of my husband, showed more worry in one sentence than Andrew had in years. "I survived," I said, "but it wasn't an accident." Over the next hour, I told him everything. About William's death, about Andrew's growing greed, about overhearing his plans, and finally, about that night with the gasoline and the match. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each word. When I finished, he stood and paced the small office. "So he tried to murder you," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Your own son tried to burn you alive for an inheritance." "Yes." There was no point softening it. "And the police?" I shook my head. "No evidence. My word against his. And he's a respected businessman while I'm just a confused old lady who might have left the gas on." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What do you need from me, Mrs. Collins?" "Laura," I corrected gently. "And I don't know yet. But William thought you should know what's happening. He made provisions for you in case something happened to me." I showed him the will. His eyes widened as he read. "I don't want his money," he said immediately. "That was never—" "I know," I interrupted. "But Andrew does, and he's willing to kill for it." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like William's that it made my heart ache. "What are you going to do?" I looked out the window at the garage, at the life this man had built for himself without William's help. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I can't do it alone." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'll help you. Not for the money, but because it's the right thing to do, and because William would have wanted me to." As I left Johnson's Automotive that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I wasn't alone anymore. On the bus ride home, I thought about what to do next. Marcus had promised to come to town in a few days, after arranging for someone to cover the garage. We had exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in touch. When I arrived back at my cottage, the sun was setting. From a distance, I could see someone sitting on my porch steps. Andrew. I steeled myself and approached. "Where have you been?" he demanded, standing. "I've been calling all day." "I went sightseeing," I said mildly. "Am I not allowed to do that?" He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Mom, I'm worried about you. You're not acting like yourself." "And how should I act, Andrew? After losing my home? After nearly dying?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's why I'm here. The insurance company called. They want to inspect the property tomorrow. They're asking questions." My heart beat faster, but I kept my face neutral. "What kind of questions?" "About the cause of the fire. They're saying it might have been arson." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had tried to kill me, and saw fear in his eyes. "What do they expect to find?" I asked innocently. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Because it was an accident. But I need you to tell them that you might have left the stove on or something." I unlocked my door and turned to him. "I'll tell them the truth, Andrew. Whatever I remember." His face hardened. "Mom, be reasonable. If they rule it arson, the insurance won't pay out. You'll get nothing." "Perhaps that's justice," I said quietly. "Since I was supposed to get nothing anyway." "Nothing but ashes." He paled. "What are you talking about?" "Good night, Andrew," I said, stepping inside. "I'll see you at the inspection tomorrow." I closed the door on his confused, angry face and leaned against it, my heart racing. The game was changing. If the insurance company suspected arson, Andrew would be desperate to cover his tracks. And a desperate Andrew was a dangerous one. I called Marcus that night. "I might need your help sooner than we thought," I told him. The next morning, Andrew picked me up for the insurance inspection. He was all nervous energy, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, checking his watch repeatedly. "Remember," he said as we pulled up to the charred remains of my home, "you don't remember much. You were confused. Maybe you left something on." I nodded absently, staring at the blackened shell of the house William and I had built. It hurt more than I expected, seeing our life reduced to this. The insurance investigator was already there, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Mrs. Collins? She extended her hand. I'm Patricia Dawson from Homestead Insurance. I'm investigating the cause of the fire. Yes, I said, shaking her hand firmly. I'll help however I can. Andrew hovered nervously as Ms. Dawson led me through the ruins, asking questions about the layout, about what appliances were where. And where were you when the fire started, Mrs. Collins? She asked. I could feel Andrew tense beside me. I was in the living room, I said truthfully. Reading. Did you notice anything unusual before the fire? Any smells? Sounds? I paused, looking around at the destroyed room. There was a smell, I said slowly. Like chemicals. Andrew stiffened. Mom, you never mentioned chemicals? Ms. Dawson interrupted, her interest piqued. Can you describe it? Like gasoline, I said. I thought it was strange, but before I could investigate, there was a spark and then flames everywhere. Ms. Dawson was writing rapidly in her notebook. Andrew's face had gone white. Mrs. Collins, she said carefully, our initial findings suggest accelerants were used in multiple locations. Accelerants? I repeated innocently. Gasoline, she clarified, which matches what you smelled. This was no accident, Mrs. Collins. Someone deliberately set this fire. Andrew's phone rang suddenly, startlingly loud in the tense silence. He excused himself, walking quickly to the edge of the property. Ms. Dawson lowered her voice. Mrs. Collins, is there anyone who might want to harm you, or who would benefit from this fire? I looked toward Andrew, who was gesturing angrily on his phone call. I can't imagine who, I said softly. Ms. Dawson followed my gaze, her eyes narrowing slightly. The police will want to speak with you, she said. This is now officially a criminal investigation. Andrew returned, his face composed but his eyes frantic. Everything okay? Ms. Dawson was just explaining that this was arson, I said calmly. The police will be investigating. A muscle twitched in Andrew's jaw. That's ridiculous. Who would want to burn down Mom's house? Ms. Dawson smiled thinly. That's what we intend to find out, Mr. Collins. After she left, Andrew exploded. What the hell, Mom? Gasoline? You never said anything about gasoline. I looked at him steadily. Didn't I? My memory must be playing tricks on me again. He ran both hands through his hair, pacing. This is a disaster. If they rule it arson, the insurance won't pay out, I finished for him. Yes, you mentioned that. It seems I'll be left with nothing. He stopped pacing to look at me, and for a moment I saw calculation in his eyes. Not nothing, he said, his voice softening. You'll always have me, Mom. I'll take care of you. The same way you took care of me with gasoline and matches? I wanted to ask. Instead, I smiled tiredly. Take me back to the cottage, Andrew. I'm exhausted. On the drive back, he tried to convince me again to move in with him and Vanessa. His voice was gentle, reasonable, but I could hear the desperation underneath. He needed to control me now more than ever. I'll think about it, I lied as he dropped me off. Inside, I locked the door and called Marcus again. The insurance investigator confirmed it was arson, I told him. The police are getting involved. That's good, right? He asked. They'll investigate Andrew? Maybe, I said. But Andrew's smart and well-connected, and I have no proof he did it, just my word against his. Then we need proof, Marcus said firmly. I'm coming tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. After we hung up, I sat in my small living room, thinking. The metal box sat on the coffee table, still full of William's secrets. I opened it again, rifling through the papers until I found what I was looking for. A letter from William to Marcus, dated just weeks before his death. My son, it began. If you're reading this, then Laura has found you. which means she's in danger. The letter went on to explain William's suspicions about Andrew, about the changes in him after he married Vanessa, about the questions he'd asked about the will. "I've never told him he's not my biological son," William wrote. "Perhaps that was a mistake, but I've loved him as my own, even when I began to see the darkness in him. Laura refuses to see it. She loves him too much. But you, Marcus, you will see clearly where she cannot. Protect her if I'm no longer there to do it." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the box. Tomorrow, Marcus would arrive, and together we would find a way to expose Andrew's treachery, not just for justice, but for William, for the man who had loved us both. As night fell, I prepared for bed, double-checking the locks on the doors and windows. The cottage felt suddenly vulnerable, too isolated. Andrew knew where I was, and now he knew I was a threat to him. I placed a chair against the bedroom door and kept the metal box close beside me on the bed. Sleep was a long time coming. In my dreams, I saw fire. Not the destructive blaze that had consumed my home, but the purifying flame my father had spoken of. The kind that burns away what is useless and refines what is valuable. I woke at dawn feeling strangely peaceful. Today was the beginning of the end, of Andrew's lies, of my fear, of the shadow that had hung over us since William's death. One way or another, the truth would come to light. And like the phoenix my father had told me about in childhood stories, I would rise from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and free. I waited on the porch the next morning, a cup of coffee warming my hands against the autumn chill. The sun was just breaking through the trees when a blue pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Marcus Johnson stepped out, looking even more like William in the clear morning light. "You made good time," I said as he approached. "Left at dawn." He glanced around at the small property. "Nice place. Secluded." "Too secluded, perhaps," I replied, thinking of how easy it would be for Andrew to reach me here, away from prying eyes. Marcus seemed to read my thoughts. "That's why I'm here. Let's go inside and talk." In the kitchen, I poured him coffee while he spread out a notepad. His methodical approach reminded me so much of William that it made my chest ache. "I've been thinking," he said, taking a sip. "We need evidence that connects Andrew directly to the fire." I nodded. "The insurance investigator already confirmed it was arson." "That's good, but it doesn't prove Andrew did it." Marcus tapped his pen against the paper. "Did anyone see him that night? Neighbors? Security cameras?" I shook my head. "The nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away, and this isn't the kind of neighborhood with security cameras." "What about his car? Or his clothes? Gasoline leaves traces." "By now he would have cleaned everything," I said. "Andrew is nothing if not thorough." Marcus frowned, then his eyes lit up. "His phone. If he was at your house that night, his cell phone would have pinged the nearest tower." Hope sparked within me. "The police could check that. Only with probable cause," Marcus reminded me. "We need something to make them look at Andrew specifically." We spent the morning brainstorming, but every idea seemed to hit a wall. Andrew was careful. He'd planned this for months, maybe years. Around noon, my phone rang. "Andrew," I answered, putting it on speaker so Marcus could hear. "Hello?" "Mom, we need to talk." Andrew's voice was tight, controlled. "The police came to my office this morning. They're saying the fire was deliberate." "Yes, the insurance investigator mentioned that." I kept my voice neutral. "They asked where I was that night, like I'm a suspect or something." His indignation would have sounded genuine to anyone who didn't know the truth. "And where were you?" I asked innocently. A pause. "At home with Vanessa, of course. She told them the same thing." Of course she did. Vanessa would say anything Andrew told her to. "That's good then," I said. "You have an alibi." Another pause. Mom, have you been talking to the police about me? Why would I do that, Andrew? I don't know. You've been acting strangely since the fire. Distant, secretive. I thought of the metal box hidden in my bedroom. I nearly died, Andrew. That changes a person. He sighed, the sound crackling through the speaker. Look, I'm worried about you out there all alone. I spoke with Dr. Reynolds. He thinks you might be suffering from post-traumatic stress, maybe even some mild paranoia. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. I felt my blood run cold. Does he? I kept my voice level. He suggested we consider temporary supervised care, just until you're more stable. The trap was closing. If Andrew convinced people I was mentally unstable, anything I said about him would be dismissed. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm perfectly fine. At least come for dinner tonight, he pressed. Vanessa's making your favorite, pot roast. We can talk about it more. I glanced at Marcus, who nodded slightly. Keep him close. Learn what he knows. All right, I agreed. What time? 6. I'll pick you up. After hanging up, Marcus shook his head. He's trying to discredit you, make you look unstable. I know. My hands trembled slightly. He's getting desperate. Good. Marcus's voice hardened. Desperate people make mistakes. At 5:30, Marcus reluctantly left, promising to stay at the motel in town and return in the morning. We agreed not to mention his existence to Andrew yet. He was our ace in the hole. Andrew arrived precisely at 6, dressed in an expensive suit, his smile practiced and perfect. You look nice, Mom, he said, helping me into his luxury sedan. Are you feeling better? Much, I lied, clutching my purse, where I'd hidden a small recording device Marcus had given me. Just in case. Andrew and Vanessa's house was exactly what you'd expect. Large, modern, and coldly perfect. Vanessa greeted me at the door, her smile as artificial as the flowers on the dining table. Laura, you look wonderful, she air-kissed my cheek, considering everything you've been through. Vanessa was 38, 20 years younger than Andrew, with the kind of beauty that comes from expensive treatments and careful maintenance. She'd been his secretary before becoming his wife 3 years ago. Thank you for having me, I said politely. Dinner was a stilted affair. Vanessa's pot roast was dry, but I complimented it anyway. Andrew kept refilling my wine glass, which I pretended to sip but barely touched. I needed a clear head tonight. So, Andrew said as Vanessa cleared the plates, I spoke with Chief Harrison today about the fire investigation. I perked up. Chief Harrison was an old friend of William's. Oh? He says they're following some leads, but nothing concrete. Andrew swirled his wine casually. I mentioned your concerns about feeling unsafe. My spine stiffened. I never said I felt unsafe. Not in those words, no. His smile was sympathetic, patronizing. But a woman your age, living alone after such a trauma, it's understandable. I'm 68, Andrew, not 98. Plenty of women my age live independently. Of course. He backpedaled smoothly. I just meant, with everything that's happened, it might be good to have support around you. Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss. Here it comes, I thought. Andrew leaned forward, his expression earnest. I found a wonderful place called Golden Sunset Assisted Living. It's more like a resort than a care facility. Private rooms, daily activities, full-time medical staff. I don't need medical staff, I said flatly. It's just a precaution. After what Dr. Reynolds said about potential trauma responses. I never spoke to Dr. Reynolds. Andrew's smile didn't falter. I consulted with him on your behalf. He reviewed your medical records from the hospital. Without my permission? Anger flared in my chest. As your medical proxy. Since when are you my medical proxy? A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Since Dad died, you signed the papers, remember? When you were updating your will?" I did remember, vaguely. There had been so many documents after William died. Andrew had handled everything, presenting paper after paper for me to sign in my grief. "I'm not going to Golden Sunset, Andrew." I kept my voice firm. "Mom, be reasonable. The insurance money will take months if it comes through at all. You can't afford to live independently right now." "I have savings," I countered. He laughed lightly. "Barely enough for a few months' rent. And with the investigation ongoing, you might never see the insurance money." How convenient that would be for him. No insurance payout meant I would be completely dependent on his generosity. "I've made my decision," I said, standing up. "Thank you for dinner, but I'd like to go home now." Andrew's facade cracked slightly. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. After what you've been through, what I've been through," I interrupted, "is enough to know when I'm being manipulated." His eyes widened, then narrowed. Vanessa, who had been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. "Laura, we only want what's best for you," she soothed, placing a hand on my arm. I resisted the urge to shake it off. "Then respect my choices." Andrew stood, towering over me. For a moment I saw the same coldness in his eyes that I'd seen the night of the fire. "I'll drive you home," he said, his voice tight. The car ride was silent. When we reached my cottage, Andrew turned off the engine but didn't unlock the doors. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't want to have to force this issue." A chill ran down my spine. "What does that mean?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It means that if you can't make rational decisions about your care, others might have to make them for you. Legally." "You're threatening to have me declared incompetent?" The shock of it stole my breath. "Not threatening," he corrected smoothly. "Just explaining the reality. Dr. Reynolds is concerned about possible cognitive effects from smoke inhalation, combined with the trauma and your age." "Get out of my way, Andrew." My voice shook with fury. "I want to go inside." He studied me for a long moment, then unlocked the doors. "Think about what I said, Mom. Golden Sunset has an opening now, but they won't hold it forever." I got out without answering, walking steadily to my door though my knees felt like water. Once inside, I collapsed into a chair, my heart hammering. The recording device. I'd forgotten to turn it on. Marcus arrived early the next morning, his face grim when I told him about Andrew's thinly veiled threat. "He's accelerating his timeline," he said. "First the fire, now this. He's getting desperate to control you and your assets." "We need to move faster," I agreed. "But how? We still have no proof he set the fire." Marcus paced the small living room. "We need to find out what he and Vanessa are planning next. Is there any way to access his emails? His phone?" I shook my head, then paused. "Wait, there might be something." I went to the bedroom and returned with William's metal box. Inside, beneath the documents, was a small leather address book. William kept track of everything, I explained, flipping through it, including passwords. There it was, in William's neat handwriting. Andrew, laptop, William 1967. The password hadn't been changed in years, not since William had helped Andrew set up his first professional email account. Would he still use the same password? Marcus asked skeptically. Andrew is creatures of habit, I said. And arrogant. He'd never imagine anyone would try to access his accounts. Even if the password still works, we'd need his laptop, Marcus pointed out. I smiled grimly. And I know exactly when it will be unattended. I explained that every Thursday at 7 p.m., Andrew had a standing racquetball game with clients, followed by drinks. Vanessa always used that time for her weekly spa visit. The house will be empty from about 7 to 10, I said. And I still have a key. Marcus looked troubled. Breaking into his house is illegal. If we're caught, it's not breaking in if I have a key, I corrected. And I'm just a confused old woman checking on my son's house, aren't I? He didn't look convinced, but nodded. What exactly are we looking for? Anything connecting him to the fire. Receipts for gasoline, perhaps? Or emails about the insurance policy. We spent the rest of the day planning. That night after Marcus returned to his motel, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cottage made me start, imagining Andrew coming to force me into assisted living. When dawn finally broke, I called the one person who might be able to help us. Judith Barnes, my friend of 30 years and a retired nurse who had worked with Dr. Reynolds. "Judy," I said when she answered, "I need your help." 2 hours later, Judith sat in my living room, her face pale after hearing my story. "Laura, this is serious," she said. "If Andrew is trying to have you declared incompetent, can he do it?" I asked bluntly. She hesitated. "It would be difficult without clear evidence of cognitive decline. But if he's convinced Dr. Reynolds—" "That's why I need your help," I pressed. "You worked with Reynolds for years. He trusts your assessment." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You want me to vouch for your competence." "I want you to request my medical records," I clarified. "As a concerned friend and former medical professional, see what Reynolds has actually documented." Judith nodded slowly. "I can do that. But Laura, if Andrew really tried to kill you, shouldn't you go to the police?" "With what evidence?" I sighed. My word against his? The respected businessman versus his traumatized, possibly senile mother. She reached over to squeeze my hand. "I've known you for 30 years. There's nothing wrong with your mind." After she left, promising to contact Dr. Reynolds that day, I called Marcus to update him on our plan for Thursday night. "I don't like you going into that house," he said. "Let me do it alone." "Andrew might have security cameras," I countered. "They won't question my presence, but a stranger would raise alarms." He conceded reluctantly. "Fine, but we get in and out as quickly as possible." Thursday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the intervening days jumping at shadows, keeping the doors locked, and sleeping with a chair propped against my bedroom door. Andrew called twice, his voice honey-sweet with concern, pressing me to reconsider Golden Sunset. I deflected, saying I needed more time to think about it. Judith called on Wednesday with troubling news. "Laura, I got access to your file. Reynolds has documented possible early-stage dementia exacerbated by trauma. He's recommending a psychiatric evaluation." My blood ran cold. "Based on what? He's never even examined me." "Based on Andrew's reports of your behavior," she said grimly. "Apparently you've been paranoid and making strange accusations. The trap was closing faster than I'd thought." "What do we do?" "I've requested that any evaluation be done by Dr. Miller instead. She's more thorough and less likely to be influenced by Andrew. I said I'd observed you myself and saw no signs of cognitive impairment. Will that work?" "It buys us time," she said. "But Laura, be careful. Andrew seems determined." More determined than she knew. Thursday evening arrived at last. Marcus picked me up at 6:30, his truck now parked behind the cottage where it wouldn't be seen from the road. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as we drove toward Andrew's house. "No," I admitted, "but I'm more afraid of doing nothing." Andrew and Vanessa's house sat on a manicured acre in the most exclusive neighborhood in town. We parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, just two people out for an evening stroll. At exactly 7:15, I used my key to enter through the side door that led to Andrew's home office. The house was silent, the alarm system not activated. Andrew never bothered when he was only going to be gone a few hours. "His laptop will be in the study," I whispered, leading Marcus down the hallway. The study was pure Andrew, all dark wood, leather, and ego. Awards and certificates lined the walls. His laptop sat on the massive desk, closed but not locked away. "Keep watch," I told Marcus, sitting at the desk and opening the computer. The password screen appeared. I typed William 1967 with trembling fingers and held my breath. It worked. The desktop appeared, revealing dozens of neatly organized folders. "Where do we start?" Marcus whispered from the doorway. "Emails," I decided, clicking on the mail icon. "Recent ones first." There were hundreds, maybe thousands. I started with the most recent, scanning subject lines for anything suspicious. "Wait," I murmured, opening one from someone named Fletcher with the subject "Re Collins Property Development." The email was brief. "Plans approved. Can break ground as soon as the lot is cleared. Insurance issues?" I opened Andrew's reply. "Insurance being handled. Expect resolution within the month." My hands shook as I forwarded the email to an address Marcus had created specifically for this purpose, then continued searching. There was more. Emails to a real estate developer about future plans for the Collins homestead, dated weeks before the fire. Correspondence with Golden Sunset, initiated 3 months ago, not recently as Andrew had implied. And most damning, an email to Vanessa the day before the fire. "Everything's in place. After tomorrow we'll have a clean slate to work with." I forwarded everything, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give us away. "Laura," Marcus hissed suddenly. "Car lights." I quickly closed the email program but left the computer on. Shutting down would take too long. "Out the back," I whispered, hurrying to join him at the door. We slipped through the kitchen and out the back door just as the garage door began to rumble open at the front of the house. "That can't be Andrew," I whispered as we crouched behind a hedge. "It's too early." We made our way along the edge of the property, staying in the shadows. As we reached the side yard, I caught a glimpse of the car in the driveway. It wasn't Andrew's sleek sedan. It was a service van marked Golden Sunset Transportation. "They're coming for me," I breathed, freezing in place. "Tonight." Marcus grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the street. "Then we're not going back to your cottage. Come on." We hurried to his truck and drove away just as 2 men in uniforms approached my cottage front door. "They can't legally take you without your consent," Marcus said as we sped toward the highway. "Not without a court order." "Since when has legality stopped Andrew?" My voice shook. "Where are we going?" "My place," he said grimly. "Charleston. It's the last place Andrew will look." As we drove through the night, I clutched my purse containing the metal box, the one thing I couldn't leave behind. "We have evidence now," Marcus said, trying to reassure me. "Those emails prove Andrew was planning something. They're suggestive, but not definitive," I sighed. "Nothing explicitly says I'm going to burn down my mother's house." "It's a start," he insisted. "And we have the letter from William, too. His suspicions about Andrew." I touched the box in my lap. "And something else," I said quietly. "Something I haven't shown you yet." 3 hours later, we arrived at Marcus's small house on the outskirts of Charleston. It was a modest place, neat and simple, much like the man himself. "It's not much," he apologized, showing me to the spare bedroom. "But you'll be safe here." "Thank you," I said, meaning it more deeply than he could know. This man, my husband's son, had put his life on hold to help a stranger. Except I wasn't a stranger, not really. And it was time he knew why. We sat at his kitchen table, a pot of tea between us. I placed the metal box on the table and took out the letter I hadn't shown him yet, the one William had written directly to him. "William left this for you," I said, sliding it across the table. I think you should read it. Marcus looked at the envelope, his name written in William's hand, and opened it carefully. His eyes moved across the page, widening as he read. When he finished, he looked up at me, stunned. He knew, Marcus said softly. All those years he knew about Andrew's nature. He was protecting you. Yes, I nodded. But there's more. Something William wanted you to know. I took a deep breath. William was your father, Marcus. Your biological father. He stared at me. I know. My mother told me years ago. What you don't know, I continued, is that William changed his will shortly before he died. If anything happened to me under suspicious circumstances, everything would go to you, his true son, not Andrew. Marcus set the letter down carefully. I don't understand. If Andrew isn't William's biological son, he isn't, I confirmed. I was pregnant when I met William. He raised Andrew as his own, never telling him the truth. Does Andrew know? I don't think so, I said. But he suspects something. William always treated him differently. Not cruelly, but with a certain distance. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, so like William's gesture that it made my heart ache. So all this, the fire, trying to have you committed, it's for an inheritance he has no right to anyway. An inheritance, the house, the land, I sighed. Andrew has always been possessive, even as a child. What's his is his, and what isn't his he covets. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. We need to go to the police, with the emails, the changed will, everything. And say what? That my son tried to kill me for an inheritance he doesn't legally deserve? That my late husband's illegitimate son should inherit instead? I shook my head. Without direct evidence of the arson, it's still our word against his. Then what's your plan? He demanded. I looked at this man, this stranger who carried William's eyes, William's gestures, William's sense of justice. The truth, I said simply. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. The next morning my phone rang early. Unknown number. Hello, I answered cautiously. Laura, it's Judith. Thank God you answered. Where are you? Somewhere safe, I said. She said. What's happened? Andrew filed for emergency guardianship yesterday, she said, her voice tense. Claimed you'd become paranoid and fled your residence. There are people looking for you. Police, private investigators. They're saying you are mentally unstable and a danger to yourself. My stomach clenched. He can't just declare me incompetent without an evaluation. He got Dr. Reynolds to sign off based on your erratic behavior and flight risk status. Laura, this is serious. There's a hearing scheduled for Monday. 3 days away. What happens at the hearing? If you don't appear, the judge will likely grant temporary guardianship to Andrew, she explained. If you do appear, you'll need to convince the judge you're competent. And if Andrew has already convinced everyone I'm not? Her silence was answer enough. After we hung up, I told Marcus about the guardianship hearing. We need to be there, he said immediately, with everything we've found. If I show up, Andrew will have me taken into custody immediately, I pointed out. And our evidence is suggestive, but not conclusive. Marcus thought for a moment. What if we had actual proof about the fire? Something irrefutable. Like what? Security footage, he said slowly. Mrs. Peterson, your neighbor, didn't you say she had those new doorbell cameras installed last summer? I straightened. Yes, after the break-ins on the next street. And her house faces yours, Marcus continued, excitement building. Her camera might have captured Andrew arriving or leaving that night. If the footage still exists, I cautioned, it's been over 2 weeks. Most systems store footage for 30 days, he said. It's worth checking. I hesitated. I can't go back there. Andrew will have people watching my cottage. I'll go, Marcus decided. Tonight. Your neighbor doesn't know me, but she knows you. Write me a note explaining who I am and why I need her help. It was risky, but what choice did we have? The rest of the day crawled by. I called Judith again, asking her to gather supportive statements from other friends about my mental competence. Marcus contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in elder law, explaining our situation in hypothetical terms. By evening, we had the beginnings of a plan. Marcus would drive back to town, speak with Mrs. Peterson, and hopefully secure the footage we needed. I would prepare a statement for the hearing, detailing everything that had happened. As Marcus prepared to leave, I handed him the note from Mrs. Peterson and something else. The DNA test results from William's box. Why are you giving me this? He asked, looking at the paper that confirmed Andrew wasn't William's biological son. Insurance, I said simply, in case something goes wrong. He nodded grimly, tucking everything safely into his jacket pocket. I'll be back by morning. Lock the doors behind me. After he left, I sat at his kitchen table drafting my statement. The house creaked and settled around me, unfamiliar sounds in an unfamiliar place. I thought about Andrew, the baby I had cradled, the boy I had raised, the man who had tried to kill me. Where had it all gone wrong? Had the darkness always been there, or had it grown over time, nurtured by greed and entitlement? The phone Marcus had given me, a prepaid one that couldn't be traced, rang suddenly, startling me. Hello? Mrs. Collins? An unfamiliar male voice. This is Detective Rivera with the County Sheriff's Department. We need to talk about the fire at your residence. My pulse quickened. How did you get this number? Your friend Judith provided it, he said. She's concerned about you. We all are. I hesitated. Something felt wrong. May I call you back at the station, just to verify who you are? A pause. Of course. But Mrs. Collins, we have some urgent information about your son Andrew. It might be better to discuss it now. What about Andrew? Despite my suspicion, concern crept in. We have evidence suggesting his involvement in the fire, the detective said, but we need your statement to proceed. Where are you staying? I can send an officer to take your statement officially. Every instinct screamed warning. Judith would never give out this number without telling me first. I'll come to the station tomorrow, I said carefully. Thank you for calling. I hung up before he could protest, then immediately turned off the phone. My hands shook as I realized how close I'd come to revealing my location. Andrew was getting desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. I spent a restless night, jumping at every sound, the metal box clutched to my chest like a talisman. By dawn, with no word from Marcus, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. Had something happened to him? Had Andrew somehow intercepted him? I was contemplating what to do when I heard a car in the driveway. Peering through the curtains, I saw Marcus's truck and sagged with relief. But when the driver's door opened, it wasn't Marcus who stepped out. It was Andrew. And in his hand was William's metal box, the one I'd given Marcus for safekeeping. Time stopped. My breath caught in my throat as I watched Andrew approach the house. William's metal box clutched in his hand. He moved with the confidence of a predator who had cornered his prey. Where was Marcus? What had Andrew done to him? There was no time to run, nowhere to run to. This was Marcus's home, unfamiliar territory. Andrew would catch me before I made it out the back door. I retreated from the window, my mind racing. The kitchen. There had to be something I could use to defend myself. I grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet just as the front door opened. "Mom," Andrew's voice called out, deceptively gentle. I know you're here. Let's talk. I stood perfectly still in the kitchen, the skillet clutched in my trembling hands. This has gone far enough, he continued, his footsteps moving through the living room. Running away with a stranger? Breaking into my house? What were you thinking? The footsteps came closer. I raised the skillet. Andrew appeared in the doorway, stopping when he saw me. His eyes flicked to the skillet and he smiled, that condescending smile I'd grown to hate. Really, Mom? You're going to hit your own son? He set the metal box on the counter between us. Put that down. You're only proving my point about your mental state. Where's Marcus? My voice was steadier than I expected. Your new friend? Andrew's smile tightened. Let's just say he won't be joining us. Fear clutched at my heart. What did you do to him? Nothing he won't recover from, Andrew said dismissively. Though I doubt he'll be able to attend your guardianship hearing on Monday. He gestured to the box. Interesting reading material in there. You've been keeping secrets. So have you, I replied, not lowering the skillet. Like how you tried to burn me alive in my own home. Andrew's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. That's exactly the kind of paranoid accusation I was warning Dr. Reynolds about. Why would I do something like that to my own mother? For money. For the land. For the inheritance you feel entitled to. I took a step forward. But it's not yours, Andrew. It never was. And now I have proof. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Proof? You mean these ramblings of a dead man? He tapped the box. Who would believe them over me, a respected businessman versus an elderly woman with trauma-induced delusions? The police might, I said, especially with the security footage from Mrs. Peterson's doorbell camera. Something flickered across Andrew's face. Uncertainty. Had Marcus succeeded in getting the footage before Andrew found him? You're bluffing, he said, but his confidence had cracked slightly. There's no footage, isn't there? I matched his earlier condescending tone. Why don't we let the police decide? Or better yet, the insurance investigators? Andrew's jaw tightened. He glanced at his watch. We don't have time for this. There's a car waiting outside. You're coming with me to Golden Sunset until the hearing. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. His voice hardened. I have temporary emergency custody until the hearing. Signed by Judge Williams this morning. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. You can come voluntarily, or I can have the men outside assist you. Your choice. I stared at the paper, recognizing the court seal. He was telling the truth. How did you find me? I asked, playing for time, my mind racing for options. Your friend Marcus wasn't as clever as he thought, Andrew said smugly. When he approached Mrs. Peterson about the security footage, my private investigator was watching your cottage. One phone call to me and I followed him back here. He checked his watch again. Now we're leaving. Put down the skillet, Mom. I slowly lowered the skillet to the counter, my eyes never leaving his. I need to use the bathroom first. Andrew hesitated, then nodded. Make it quick. The men outside aren't as patient as I am. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, and leaned against it, my heart hammering. There had to be a way out. The small window was too narrow to climb through. No phone to call for help. Think, Laura, think. My eyes fell on the medicine cabinet. Pills, bandages, nothing useful. Then I spotted Marcus's electric razor on the shelf. Not the razor itself, the charging cord. An idea formed, a desperate, dangerous idea. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink, buying time as I quickly unplugged the razor and coiled the cord in my pocket. Then I took a deep breath and opened the door. Andrew was waiting in the hallway, impatient. Let's go. I need my purse, I said, pointing to where it sat on the kitchen counter. He nodded curtly, following close behind as I retrieved it. As I reached for my purse, my fingers brushed against the skillet. In one fluid motion, I swung around, the heavy iron connecting with Andrew's shoulder. He stumbled back with a yell of pain, but didn't fall. I hadn't hit hard enough, my old arms lacking the strength I needed. "You crazy old woman," he snarled, lunging forward to grab me. I darted around the counter, but he was faster, catching my arm and yanking me toward him. I screamed, struggling against his grip. "Enough!" he shouted, twisting my arm painfully. "This ends now." The front door burst open. 2 men in golden sunset uniforms rushed in, followed by a police officer. "What's going on here?" the officer demanded, taking in the scene. "Officer," Andrew immediately switched to his concerned son voice. "Thank God you're here. My mother is having a severe psychological episode. We have a court order to transport her to a care facility." The officer looked at me, his expression uncertain. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "No, I'm not all right," I said, trying to pull away from Andrew's grip. "My son tried to kill me 2 weeks ago by setting my house on fire. Now he's trying to have me committed to cover his tracks." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Sir, let go of your mother." "She attacked me with that skillet," Andrew protested, but released my arm. "She's confused, traumatized from the fire. We have papers." "I'd like to see those papers," the officer interrupted, holding out his hand. While Andrew fumbled for the court documents, I seized my opportunity. In a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, I said, "Ask him where Marcus Johnson is. Ask him what he did to William Collins's real son." The officer frowned. "Who's Marcus Johnson?" "A man who was helping me," I said quickly, before Andrew could interrupt. "My late husband's biological son. Andrew found out we had evidence against him, and now Marcus is missing." "She's delusional," Andrew cut in, handing the papers to the officer. "There's no Marcus Johnson. My father never had another son." The officer scanned the documents, his expression grave. "These appear to be in order, ma'am. I'm sorry, but check the garage," a voice called weakly from outside. We all turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, blood caking one side of his face, leaning heavily against the frame. "He's in the garage," Marcus repeated, pointing at Andrew. "Security footage from the fire. On my laptop. He took it from me." The officer's hand moved to his weapon. "Sir, is that true?" Andrew's face contorted with rage. "He broke into my house. He's been filling my mother's head with lies." "Check the garage." Marcus enunciated each word, his eyes never leaving Andrew's. Something in his tone made the officer nod to one of the golden sunset attendants. "Go look." "You can't be serious," Andrew protested. "This man is trespassing. These are private property laws." "Sir, I'm going to need you to be quiet while we sort this out," the officer said firmly. The attendant returned moments later, a laptop in his hands. "Found this in the trunk of the blue sedan outside." The officer took the laptop. "Is this yours, sir?" he asked Marcus. Marcus nodded, wincing from the effort. "Open the video file on the desktop. It's dated the night of the fire." The officer opened the laptop and clicked on the file. We all watched in silence as grainy footage played, showing the front of my house from across the street. A car pulled up. Andrew's car. The timestamp showed 9:17 p.m. A figure emerged, unmistakably Andrew in his expensive coat, carrying something. He disappeared into the house. 8 minutes later, he emerged, got in his car, and drove away. 2 minutes after that, the first flickers of flame appeared in my living room window. Andrew's face had drained of all color. That's not me," he stammered. "That could be anyone." The officer closed the laptop. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me to the station for questioning." "This is absurd!" Andrew's voice rose to a shout. "That video is doctored. This whole thing is a setup." "Sir," the officer said, his hand moving to his handcuffs. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Andrew's eyes darted wildly around the room, like a cornered animal. For a horrifying moment, I thought he might attack the officer. Then his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over," he hissed at me as the officer cuffed him. "Not by a long shot." As they led him away, Marcus collapsed into a kitchen chair, holding his head. I rushed to his side. "What happened?" I asked, examining the gash above his temple. "Ambush," he winced. "When I left Mrs. Peterson's. 2 men. Professional." "We need to get you to a hospital," I said, reaching for a clean kitchen towel to press against his wound. "No time," he said, catching my hand. "Hearings tomorrow morning. Need to be there." I looked at him, this man I barely knew, who had risked his life to help me, and felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. "We'll be there," I promised. Together, aid. The courtroom was packed the next morning. News travels fast in small towns, and the story of a prominent businessman allegedly trying to kill his mother had spread like wildfire. Marcus sat beside me, a bandage covering the worst of his injuries. He'd refused to go to the hospital until after the hearing, stubborn just like his father. Our lawyer, Marcus's friend David Chen, organized our evidence meticulously. The security footage, Andrew's emails, William's letters, and statements from friends attesting to my mental competence. Andrew sat at the opposite table with his attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit. He'd been released on bail that morning, the perks of wealth and influence. He didn't look at me once. Judge Martha Reeves, a stern woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes, called the court to order. "This is an unusual case," she began, reviewing the documents before her. "We have competing petitions. Mr. Collins is seeking guardianship over his mother, claiming diminished capacity. Mrs. Collins is countering with evidence of criminal activity by her son, which would render his petition moot." Andrew's attorney rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we believe Mrs. Collins' mental state has been compromised by age and trauma. Her accusations against my client are symptomatic of paranoid delusions. We have expert testimony from Dr. Reynolds, who never examined me," I interrupted, unable to help myself. Judge Reeves gave me a sharp look. "Mrs. Collins, you'll have your turn to speak." "Forgive me, Your Honor," I said, chastened. The judge turned back to Andrew's lawyer. "Continue, Mr. Davis." Davis outlined their case. My erratic behavior following the fire, my flight from my residence, my bizarre accusations against Andrew, and Dr. Reynolds' assessment based on hospital records and Andrew's reports. When it was our turn, David Chen presented our evidence methodically, saving the security footage for last. "Your Honor," he said, "this isn't about Mrs. Collins' competence. It's about Mr. Collins attempting to silence his mother after she discovered his criminal actions." The courtroom fell silent as the footage played on a large screen. There was no denying it was Andrew entering my house just minutes before the fire started. Judge Reeves's expression darkened. "Mr. Davis, how do you explain this evidence?" Andrew leaned over to whisper urgently to his lawyer. Davis looked uncomfortable as he stood. "Your Honor, my client was indeed at the house that evening, but only to check on his mother. He left before any fire started. The timing is unfortunate but coincidental." "And the gasoline residue found at multiple points of origin?" Judge Reeves asked pointedly, referring to the fire investigator's report in front of her. Davis faltered. "We would suggest that Mrs. Collins may have spilled some while refueling her lawn equipment earlier that day." I hadn't owned a lawnmower in years. William had always hired neighborhood boys to mow our small yard. Judge Reeves wasn't buying it either. "Mr. Chen, you have further evidence?" David nodded, presenting the emails showing Andrew's plans for developing my property, his early inquiries to Golden Sunset, and the damning message to Vanessa about having a clean slate to work with after the fire. As each piece of evidence mounted, I watched Andrew's composure crack. His confident facade slipped, revealing flashes of the angry, entitled child he'd always been beneath the polished exterior. Finally, Judge Reeves turned to me. "Mrs. Collins, would you like to make a statement?" I stood, my legs steadier than I expected. The courtroom quieted as I looked directly at Andrew for the first time. "I raised Andrew as my son," I began, my voice clear in the hushed room. "When I was young and alone, William Collins married me and gave my unborn child his name, his love, and his protection. He never told Andrew he wasn't his biological son. He loved him as his own." Andrew's head snapped up, shock written across his face. "Yes, Andrew," I said, addressing him directly. "William wasn't your biological father, but he chose to be your father in every way that mattered. And how did you repay that lifetime of love? By trying to kill his wife, your mother, for an inheritance that was never rightfully yours." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Andrew's face had gone deathly pale. "I don't want vengeance," I continued, turning back to the judge. "I want justice. I want the truth known. William suspected what Andrew might do. That's why he changed his will to protect me. That's why he reached out to his biological son, Marcus Johnson." I gestured to Marcus beside me. "William knew someday I might need protection from Andrew's greed. He was right. Without Marcus, I might be dead, or locked away in a facility while Andrew sold my home and land for development." I took a deep breath, feeling decades of unspoken truth finally breaking free. "Your Honor, I'm not incompetent. I'm not confused. I'm a woman who was nearly murdered by her son and who found unexpected help from a son she never knew she had." Judge Reeves studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins." She turned to Andrew. "Mr. Collins, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Andrew rose, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. He ignored him. "She's lying," he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "About all of it. I'm William Collins' son, his only son. This man," he jabbed a finger toward Marcus, "is a con artist trying to steal my inheritance, and my mother is either his willing accomplice or his victim." Judge Reeves's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Collins, are you willing to submit to a DNA test to establish paternity?" Andrew faltered, the confident mask slipping. That's not necessary. My birth certificate lists William Collins as your father, yes," the judge finished for him. "But Mrs. Collins has just testified that this was a legal fiction, not a biological reality. A DNA test would resolve the matter conclusively." "I refuse to dignify this farce with my DNA," Andrew snapped, his composure cracking completely. Judge Reeves's eyebrows rose slightly. "That is your right, Mr. Collins. However, in light of the evidence presented today, I am dismissing your petition for guardianship of Laura Collins. Furthermore, I am referring the evidence of arson to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Collins, you are free to go home, though I understand your home was destroyed in the fire." "She has a home with me," Marcus said, standing beside me, "for as long as she needs it." As the gavel fell, finalizing the judge's decision, Andrew lunged across the aisle toward me. "You ruined everything," he shouted as his lawyer and a court officer restrained him. "Everything." I didn't flinch. The man before me wasn't the son I'd raised. Perhaps he never had been. He was a stranger consumed by greed and entitlement. "No, Andrew," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." 3 months passed. Andrew's trial for arson and attempted murder was set for the spring. He'd been denied bail after violating a restraining order by showing up at Marcus's garage, ranting about what was rightfully his. Vanessa filed for divorce the day after his arrest, claiming she knew nothing about his plans. I wasn't sure I believed her, but without evidence, there was nothing to be done. The insurance company, after reviewing the evidence from the hearing, approved my claim. It wasn't enough to rebuild, but combined with my savings, it gave me options. Marcus insisted I continue staying with him. "The house is too big for just me anyway," he'd said with William's gentle smile. Slowly, I adjusted to this new life, to having a son who looked at me with kindness instead of calculation, who listened when I spoke instead of waiting for me to finish, who called just to check if I needed anything from the store. One evening in late autumn, as we sat on his back porch watching the sunset, Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. "I've been thinking," he began, fiddling with his coffee mug. "The garage is doing well. Business is steady. And Charleston," he gestured vaguely at the cityscape in the distance. "It's nice enough, but it's never really felt like home." I waited, sensing there was more. "I was wondering how you'd feel about moving back," he continued. "Not to your old place. That land holds too many bad memories. But there's a property near Johnson's Automotive with a house and enough space for a new garage." "Moving back?" I repeated, surprised. "You'd leave your business here?" He shrugged. "I'd start fresh. Johnson Collins Automotive has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Tears pricked my eyes. "William would have liked that." Marcus nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "So what do you say? Ready for a new chapter?" I thought about it, returning to the town where I'd spent most of my life, but with a new purpose. A new family. A chance to rebuild something better from the ashes of what was lost. Yes, I decided. I think I am. 2 weeks later, we signed the papers on the new property, a modest house with a large garage that had fallen into disrepair, the perfect blank canvas. As Marcus excitedly outlined his plans for the garage, I wandered through the empty house, imagining what it could become. Not a replacement for the home I'd lost, but something new, something ours. In what would become my bedroom, I unpacked William's metal box for the last time. The papers inside had served their purpose. Justice had been done. It was time to let go of the past. But there was one item I kept, a small wooden hummingbird William had carved for me during our first year together. It had somehow survived the fire, blackened but intact. I placed it on the windowsill where the morning light would catch it. "We did it, William," I whispered. "We protected what mattered." A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Marcus stood there, grease already staining his hands from examining the garage equipment. "I was thinking," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Maybe we could have a small housewarming when we're settled. Invite Judith and some of your other friends. Start fresh." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd like that. That evening we built a small fire in the backyard pit. The previous owners had left it untended, overtaken by weeds. Marcus cleared it out, and we sat watching the flames dance against the darkening sky. Fire had almost taken everything from me. Yet here it was again, not as a destroyer, but as a comfort, as a beginning. "I never thanked you properly," I said, watching the sparks rise into the night, "for believing me, for helping me." Marcus shook his head. "No thanks needed, it was the right thing to do." "Still," I insisted, "you put your life on hold for a stranger." He was quiet for a moment, poking at the embers with a stick. "Not a stranger," he said finally. "Family." Family. Such a simple word for such a complex thing. Andrew had been family by raising, by choice, by years of shared history, and he had betrayed it all. Marcus was family by blood, by William's choice, by his own actions when it mattered most. "William would be proud of you," I said softly. Marcus smiled. William's smile. He'd be proud of both of us. The first snow of winter began to fall, delicate flakes hissing as they met the fire. I remembered my father's words from so long ago. "Don't fear the fire, Laura. Fire only destroys what is useless." He had been right. The fire Andrew set hadn't destroyed me. It had burned away the lies, the pretense, the false security I'd wrapped around myself. It had revealed what was valuable: truth, justice, and this unexpected second chance at family. The following spring, as Johnson Collins Automotive opened its doors, I stood beside Marcus, greeting customers and handing out business cards. People looked at us curiously, the older woman and the middle-aged mechanic with the same eyes. Some whispered about Andrew's trial, which had ended with a 20-year sentence. Some wondered about the strange story of William Collins' two sons, one by choice, one by blood. Most were just grateful to have a good mechanic in town again. I let them talk. The truth was known now, not hidden away in a metal box under floorboards. And in that truth, I had found freedom. One evening, as we closed the shop, a young woman with a child in tow approached hesitantly. It took me a moment to recognize Vanessa. Without her designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Mrs. Collins," she said, her voice uncertain. I heard you were back in town." I nodded, wary but not hostile. "Yes." She glanced at the little boy clutching her hand. Andrew's son, I realized with a start. My grandson, though I'd barely seen him. Andrew had kept him away from me, claiming I was too old to handle a child. "This is Tommy," she said softly. "He's been asking about his grandmother." The boy looked up at me with curious eyes. William's eyes, oddly enough. A genetic echo from a man who wasn't his biological grandfather, but whose kindness lived on nonetheless. "Hello, Tommy," I said, kneeling despite my creaky knees. "I'm very happy to meet you." Tommy studied me solemnly, then smiled, a genuine child smile, untainted by adult complexities. "Grandma?" "Yes," I said, my heart expanding in ways I thought impossible after so much pain. "That's right. Life is strange. It burns us, rebuilds us, surprises us when we least expect it. A year ago I had been alone, watching my son light a match that would destroy my home. Now I stood with a new family, a son I never knew I had, a grandson I was just beginning to know, and a future I never could have imagined. As Tommy took my hand, chattering about his toy cars, I caught Marcus watching us, a gentle smile on his face. He nodded, understanding without words the full circle we had traveled. My father had been right about fire. It destroys what is useless, but purifies what is valuable. I had walked through the flames and emerged not just alive, but reborn, stronger, wiser, and finally free. The old Laura Collins had died in that fire. The woman who emerged from the ashes was someone new, someone who understood that family isn't always what we're born into or what we create, but sometimes what finds us when we need it most. And that was a truth worth burning for. Sometimes life burns us to teach us how to be reborn. I thought the fire was my punishment, but in reality it was my teacher. It showed me who I was, who should stay, and who should leave. And although it hurt, it left me more alive than ever. That's why, if you are listening to my story, I want you to remember this. Never fear the fire that tests you, because fire only destroys what is useless, but it purifies what is valuable. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. Your support helps me continue sharing stories of life, strength, and hope. Thank you for staying with me until the end.